Welcome, everybody, to season 3. This is year 3 of this podcast. It's crazy to think that we have made it here. Hello. Welcome. Thank you
Hi.
for being here. We love having you. My name is Meli, and I've got my co-host Maggie here with me. We are your resident Sagittarius rising co-hosts, and things are going to be a bit different than our regular episode structure for the next 8 weeks. We are so stoked to be launching our first ever course, Celestial Essentials. And let's start off by sharing what in the hell that is. Maggie, what is the Celestial Essentials course?
Well, this is like Melly said, it's our very first offering. This is a course for you if you have ever looked at an astrology chart before and you're like, that's interesting. I don't know what to do with that. Or if you know your sun sign and maybe you didn't know that you have a whole chart. There's a Mercury, there's a Mars, there's a Venus, there's a Saturn. Maybe you're ready to learn more about those things. Maybe you've been wanting to connect with yourself and understand why you are the way you are and why you act the way you act, why you say the things you say. Or maybe you want to know why the other people in your life are doing their own versions of those things that are so different from the way you do. This is a course for if you are curious about astrology and want a structured way to begin learning.
Yes, love it. Basically, take yourself from what the hell is this to astrologer. And let's talk some logistics. I'm a logistics girly in the house, and this will be a 9-week course with live weekly meetings. And these first 8 episodes of season 3 are serving basically as the lecture portion of the class, if you will. So basically, you could just listen to these first 8 episodes, just like really the whole podcast. Our first 50 episodes are that living library for you to learn about every planet, every house, all the things. Well, recently I think we both actually received some great feedback from different people who were like, I want to learn all this, but I just don't have time to listen to all 50 of those episodes or whatever it is. I wish it was more condensed somehow. And shout out actually to Brenna, who was really, I think, the catalyst for me to say, wait, we should do that. That's not a bad idea. And so here, Celestial Essentials was born. So just like perhaps you've listened to those first 50 or maybe first 100 episodes and learned as much as you have, you can listen to these 8 episodes and get so much value. However, you could also join this live course, and essentially you'll be using these lecture portions, these episodes, as your primary learning, the content. And then we're going to get together live weekly to practice. We have tons of activities and a curriculum that we're building out that is fire so far, and I cannot wait. There will be a workbook. There will be other people to learn alongside, and there's nothing like learning in community. And if I've said it once, I could say a million times, repetition is the mother of skill. Learned that one from my homie, Tony Robbins. And that is very true in many areas of life. But with astrology, if you don't repeat it, if you don't keep learning it, if you don't practice it, it's impossible to memorize. It's impossible to really get it. So this class is intended to get you to that next level from wherever you are to the next level of astrologer for you. So that's all of the kind of details so far. We are going to announce more details, including dates and price and all that good stuff in the coming weeks. However, in the show notes, we will be dropping a link for you to sign up for a waitlist. So if you're interested, pop in there, drop your email, and then you'll be the first to know. You'll be the first to get early bird special, et cetera, all the things. So exciting. Welcome to Celestial Essentials. And if you are a longtime listener of the pod, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We would not still be doing this if it were not for you. And we're just so grateful. And if you're new, hello and welcome. We're so happy to have you. Normally, we have a Jupiter moment and all this stuff that we do at the beginning, but we really, for these episodes, want to launch in and get right to the content and really get to the learning, if you will. So we're going to dive right in. Well, actually, before we do that, Maggie's got a few more words, literally from our sponsor, and then we'll carry right on.
Yes, our sponsor. If you're new here, you've probably never heard us mention Luna before. Welcome. We're glad to have you. Luna is amazing. This is the software that we use when we pull up charts. If you watch our Instagram page, you've probably seen it. If we're going to be doing more videos, so you'll become familiar with this beautiful software. One of the reasons that we love it so much is because it is equally beautiful and functional. It offers tools and features that we haven't found anywhere else. And it's actually totally changed my practice. I used to travel around with this big, heavy ephemeris, which is essentially a book of where all the planets are at any given time. And now that's a feature that Luna holds. So I don't need to take that with me anymore. It makes it really easy to search through and find all of the little minute details that we want to find. So we want to shout out Luna. Thank you for being so beautiful, so functional, and for making our job so much easier. What's really cool about this is part of your admission to this course will cover a membership with Luna. So you'll be able to use the same thing that we're using. It will be familiar with you. And I don't know that you'll be able to go back to a regular astrology software. So just super excited for that partnership. Thank you, Luna.
I think not. We cannot go back. There's no, I've
there's-
learned that and it's not the hard way. It's just a beautiful, natural way. So yeah, thanks, Luna. We love you. All right, y'all, let's get into it. So today we will be covering what astrology studies and how it's been used over history. Our resident investigator, reporter, Maggie, will be reporting on that. We will talk about the structure of the natal chart and all of the symbols and the lines and the colors and what does it all mean, so that, as Maggie said before, when you look at a chart, you don't feel like you're looking at it is a completely different language, but you don't feel like, what in the hell am I looking at? And you just close it. That is probably some of the top feedback that we get from people is, I want to get this, but I feel so overwhelmed when I look at a chart. By the end of this class, you should not feel overwhelmed. You should at least feel like, okay, I can do this. And over these next 9 weeks, then it will unfold more naturally. Why does your birth time matter? And the big three, or the primal triad, as I like to call it. We'll get into that. And essentially all of the basics that you need, like we said, to be able to look at a chart and actually have an idea of what you're looking at. So let's get into the meat and potatoes. Maggie, what the heck does astrology actually study, and how has it been used over history?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked. This is one of my favorite conversations to have. So astrology is a symbolic language describing patterns of time and experience. This is very connected to the human psyche. It's very connected to our bodies. It's very connected to our minds. It's connected to all facets of our experience here. The cosmos are within us. We can see that, and we can also observe it outside of us. These zodiacal archetypes and symbols are just inseparable from our human experience. In fact, it creates a framework that we can examine all of those facets, all of those symbols, all of those parts of life in an order that makes sense, in an order that isn't overwhelming. This can help provide a different perspective, a deeper understanding through cyclical inquiry. And this is something that people have been doing for thousands of years. As you know, I love digging into the past, and I want to know where this came from. I want to know who started and how it evolved. And one of the cool things that I found as I was preparing for this episode was just how much it did evolve over time. And it's such a beautiful kind of representation, I think, of how we as individuals evolve, but just over a really grand scale. So, for example, astrology, the earliest known records of astrology go back to ancient Mesopotamia. That is Babylon. That is like in that region of the world. And it didn't start out as horoscopes. It didn't start out as, we have this beautiful chart to look at and get all this information. It started more charting earthly events, kingships, omens, weather, when we plant, when we harvest, all of those. It was a little bit more externalized. People were not using it to understand themselves as much as they were trying to get a sense of what was going on around them. One of the first texts that, well, and it wasn't even really a text, it was like carved into tablets, was the Enuma, Anna, Enlil. And if you know about ancient times, Enlil is a familiar name. Enki and Enlil were parts of like, what is it? Göbekli Tepe. I feel like that those characters started to emerge around ancient, like the oldest sites that we can find. That was a series, the Enuma and Anna Enlil, was a series of 70 cuneiform tablets that were compiled in Babylon around the 16th century BCE. And this listed over 7,000 or between 6,000 and 7,000 celestial omens. So they're just starting to chart. And I actually found an example just so you can understand the kinds of things that they were detailing. So this is Report 10 from Volume 8 of the State Archives. If the moon becomes visible on the first day, that means reliable speech and the land will be happy. If it reaches its normal length, that means a reign of long days. If the moon at its appearance wears a crown, the king will reach the highest rank. So things like that. Just none of that has to do with their own psyche. None of that has to do, well, like I communicate like this. It's all out here. It's making sense. So then there's a text. I'm not sure which one of these was the oldest, but there was one specifically just for Venus. So I had kind of thought maybe people started with the moon because that's such an obvious, easy thing to see. But people were really connected with Venus all those thousands of years ago. There was a tablet called Venus Tablet of Emisaduka. And that is one of also the earliest, I think that was 1700 BCE. And it was a part of the Babylonian tablets that just documented observances related to Venus. And so all of the things that were connected with that, which is, love and money and the things that we desire. Next, we keep going further in time. We have the Astronomica text, which was in the 1st century AD by Marcus Manilius. And that is the earliest comprehensive of horoscopic astrology. So now we're getting a little bit less concerned about the kings and the weather and a little bit more, well, what does this mean to me? If all of these things are influencing out here, I can also obviously use that on the inside. So that's when people started to apply it to their own psyche, their own experience. Finally, we have the Tetrabiblos. We've mentioned this before. This was written by Claudius Ptolemy, and this is a pivotal Hellenistic text. So this is when we are starting to get into the astrology that is a little bit more familiar to what we do right now. We have the horoscope, we have the chart, we have the houses, the signs, all of that stuff is starting to come into more of a structured form. The time between where it started and where it started to become more recognizable to what we're doing today, that first text compared to Tetrabiblos, there was a 1,500-year difference. So that's a long time. These people are collecting lots of data. And if you think about it, these people are much more connected with the earth than we are. At least we think, I don't know what it was like to be alive then, but they didn't have the internet to look up, like, when should I plant my tomatoes? They're having to go outside and find the connection themselves, or else they die. Like it's a pretty high stakes situation. So I just think that's wild. That's a long time for something to develop. I did want to highlight as well, I won't spend too much time here, but just where it moved from origin to now, because we can look back and see the texts that were translated. It makes it easy to track where it started, where it went next. So it starts in Mesopotamia. That's Babylon. That's where we do the omens and the weather and the kingship. Time goes on, it goes through Persia. Persia was considered a bridge of civilization. So they are preserving the information that had begun in Mesopotamia, and they're transmitting it. So this is kind of more of a crucible, like it's just sitting there kind of morphing. It's not that we aren't adding anything in at this point. As it moves to Egypt, that's when we start to get into the Hellenistic astrology. That's when horoscopic astrology comes more online. And next we have Roman and Latin. And so it's just, as time progresses, we are also progressing. This is when all of the texts from Persia, from Mesopotamia are translated into Latin. And this is significant because because it is. Just trust me, okay? After it's translated into Latin, we get into Arabia, we get into Persia again, we get into the medieval Islamic world, and this is when the Greek material was expanded. So we've done an episode on the lots before. This would have been when the lots and people were starting to build and add more nuance to this system that has been building for over 1,000 years at this point. The Jewish scholars made a really big difference in how this information was preserved. They did a lot of translating. They were able to carry knowledge across cultural and linguistic boundaries. And then we get into medieval Europe, and this is when astrology traveled into Europe because of Latin. Thank you, Latin. And it started to become a part of the culture again. This is considered one of the astrology revivals. Next is the Renaissance. This is into the 1500s. This is when some of that medieval knowledge is revived, and all that segues right into our modern astrology that we know and love today. So very, very broad brushstrokes there. I do think it's interesting, over the course of all of these hundreds of years, astrology was kind of demonized at certain points, just like all good things are. People would get really upset about the predictive astrology. That was a problem for Christian people in Europe. That was a problem. It gives clues as to why some of this stuff why it disappeared in the first place. They were okay with astronomy. They were okay with calendar astrology. But as soon as you get into fate or prediction or looking at patterns and trying to prepare yourself for this current time is when it would be criminalized or forbidden or prosecuted. So I think that's fascinating. And I love that it took so long to develop, of course. That's how it is.
Yeah. Wow. You are such a historian. I love it. If you know anything about human design, Maggie's a 1-5, no, 5-1, whatever. You're an investigator. You're an investigator through and through. And that Scorpio loves to go deep. So yes, a couple things that just come to mind for me, right? Like, I know that when I first started learning astrology, I think there was a part of me that felt like I had to know astronomy to a certain extent. And some astrologers will argue that it would be much better if you do understand astronomy because of the orbit of things and timing. And there's all this math and all these things that go into determining so much. I mean, all of this, honestly. But I am here to report that I still do not really understand the astronomy of most of this. I mean, I get it, overarchingly, but just to say that setting the stage here and all this information Maggie just shared is so that like, wow, that's interesting and great to know too, as you come across skeptics, not to try to convince them and explain Persia and Latin and all the things, but for you to know within you, like, wow, okay, yeah, this is pretty cool that this has been used for that long, back when they did not have the internet and needed to know when to plant their tomatoes and whatnot. So that's how I've found this really useful, just for my knowledge, to understand, wow, I'm playing with an ancient, or I'm communing with an ancient wisdom, basically. And I wanted to also just mention, as you were talking, the axiom of as above, so below, which we've mentioned many times below too, one of our faves. That's a foundational Hermetic maxim, right? Came from the Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus. He wrote the Kybalion, or really the tablet, and then there's this book that has all of his teachings called the Kybalion. And anyway, that's this idea, right? That signifies that the microcosm, which is the individual or Earth, mirrors this macrocosm of the universe and the divine. And this is that idea that outer reality reflects inner reality, and that the higher spiritual realms mirror the lower physical ones. And so often too, as above, so below is finished with as within, so without. And it's just this beautiful reminder of how we are connected. And so Maggie mentioned, like, the cosmos are within us. What we're going to be getting into, and what you'll realize as we go through, is that the zodiac symbols, Aries, Taurus, etc., it's within us. Like, this is just all these are archetypes that were inspired by, yes, out there, but they live within us. It's why we understand them. It's why we connect with them the way that we do. Maggie, before we get started peeking at a chart, could you speak a little bit to what house system we're going to be using, because there's been a little bit of, that's a thing that's important to note, especially as we start on this journey.
Yes. Yes. So over the course of all of those years, as you can imagine, things changed a lot. People developed their own systems, their own way of looking at this information. And as such, there are many different approaches to this. There are many different house systems, which will I remember one of the first times I met you, you were like, which house system do you use? And I was like, what? I just use the one that is like on my chart. I didn't know that there are more options than I know what their names are. The ones that we primarily use, I like to use Placidus, and Meli likes to use whole sign. Whole sign is what we're going to be focusing on for this. It is simple, it is clean, it's the oldest version that we're aware of. So I think that's a good place to learn. It's just a little bit easier to look at than a pie chart with all different sized pie slices, which is what Placidus looks like. So
awesome. Yeah, let's get into that. Basically, what I like to joke and say is that if it was good enough for the Babylonians, it is good enough for me. And
yeah.
I have to honestly, astrology is so complex that I do well with complex things, but wherever you can simplify, wherever you can find a shortcut, that's the name of the game for me. And so if I can keep the chart more simple to look at, less for me to have to try to figure out, that's part of why. It's also just how I learned. However, going through too, now having seen hundreds and hundreds of charts, it hasn't steered me wrong yet. So for me, I feel that I have the basis that this is what I move forward with. Now, Maggie learned in Placidus, and I believe as it was Ptolemy or somebody who mathematically was, or looked at the sky mathematically and was like, well, actually latitude and blah, blah, blah. So we have to be a little more specific. And, you know, some of the most renowned astrologers use Placidus, and there's other systems like Maggie said. So anyway, we will be using the most simple. We're going to go whole sign, and let's dive in and actually look at the chart and let's break it down. Okay, so Maggie, if you could pull up my chart, we are going to use that as an example for looking at any chart. And when I say any chart, that is because every single human being on earth and every single minute of every single day has a chart. So essentially, the moment that I was born, somebody went outside, took a picture of the sky. This is the 2D version of what was going on in the sky at that moment. Right now, the chart looks completely different. Maggie's looks completely different, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, one of my favorite facts to throw out there is that a chart does not repeat itself, but for 26,500 years, I think is the specific, because of how all of the planets orbit at different speeds. And for them to get back to the exact same spot takes that long. And so the uniqueness of every single chart cannot be under, what's the word I'm looking for?
Underplayed.
Yeah, sure. Cannot be underplayed. I'm like, English. All right. So here we go. This is a 360-degree circle, as all circles are. And Maggie mentioned pie slices before. So we're going to talk about the math of how this kind of breaks down. You've got a 360-degree circle, and you've got 12 zodiac signs. You also happen to have 12 houses. We also happen to have 12 months in a year. And while the zodiac signs do not perfectly align with each month, right? You've got usually the middle of the month is when a zodiac season starts and goes till the middle of the following month. We're still very accustomed to these numbers. So 12, easy to remember, 360-degree circle. Let's take that 360 and divide it by 12. And that's where we get all these pie slices that are in this chart here. And you'll see, as Maggie mentioned, we're using whole sign. In whole sign, what's really beautiful is that when you take that 360 divided by 12, you get 30. So each of these pie slices takes up an even amount of the zodiac, takes up 30 degrees. And a little bit later, we'll show a comparison of what it looks like for Placidus, so you understand why that's relevant. But for right now, look how clean, and it's like somebody really just cut that pie or that pizza just perfectly. And what are each of these pie slices? Well, they are houses. Right there. Perfect. So Maggie's got her cursor over on number 1 on the left-hand side of the screen. And then if you move counterclockwise all the way around on that inner ring, you see that we go from 1 all the way over to 12. So those are our houses. And while houses are actually, ironically, some of the later things we get into as far as when we're synthesizing the information of a chart. I like starting here because it kind of builds the picture of the chart in an easy way to remember, I think. So you've got 12 houses. And then if we go on the outer ring where you've got all these different colors and symbols, those are the zodiac symbols. So some of these might look familiar to you. In particular, I'm sure if you know your sun sign, your Libra, Scorpio, whatever it is, you probably know what yours looks like. So maybe some of these look familiar. This is all 12 signs on the outside, and it's super easy to look at these as a sign being the landlord or the ruler, as we say in our astrological vernacular, of a house. So in this case, Maggie, if you'll point at Sagittarius, I am a Sagittarius rising because that symbol right there is ruling the first house. And we'll get a little bit more into why that's the rising later. But just to give that example, move down to the next house, Maggie. We've got Capricorn on the outside in the second house. So we would say Capricorn is the ruler of the second house. Now, what is all that stuff in the middle? Well, I like to think of it as if we've got landlords of the house. Sorry, not the middle of the actual chart, the in between the two wheels that we're just looking at there. What are all these symbols that we see? Those are the planets. So I like to say that in some houses we have tenants, and the more tenants we have, the more conversations are going on, the more energy there is in there. And then sometimes we have houses that are for sale or apartments that are up for rent, however you want to think of that. And there's no planets in there. And one of the most common questions is, well, what does that mean? And I like to first just tell you that obviously you're broken, but just kidding. You're obviously not broken. What would be broken would be the wheel if you didn't have all 12 signs. So it does not matter that you don't have any planets in there. It's just part of the uniqueness of your chart. And it just goes into determining how the energies of the chart are in yours versus Maggie's versus whomever's. So nothing wrong there. We'll get into that more as the weeks go on. But this is really the breakdown of how the chart comes together, let's say. Now, let's talk about what the meaning of each of these pieces is. So here, we're actually going to start with the planet. The planets, so Maggie, you're looking at Pluto over there. She's got her cursor on Pluto. And then all of these other glyphs that are in that ring, if you will. Any of the planets represent what? What is this planet? And that then gets super layered as we've talked about complexity, because when we say what, when we're talking about psychologically in a human, it's what is presenting from within you. What is this archetype, right? So now where Maggie's cursor is at the bottom, we're looking at Mars. Well, I'll give you this as an example. Mars is the planet of motivation, inspiration, action, drive, also frustration, anger. They're keywords that go along with everything. We're looking at the what. So if we're looking at Mars, we're looking at this representation of anger, motivation, whatever, within a person. Now, when we're looking at, as Maggie spoke to predictive astrology as well, and you're talking about what's going to happen in the future, well, then we might interpret Mars a little bit differently. But the point is, when we look at the planet, we're looking at the what. What are we looking at? So let's just stick with Mars, Maggie, there as you keep your cursor. You've got Mars. And it just to sort of break down, we talked about this 30 degrees. I want to point out that 8 that you see right next to the Mars, that with the little degree symbol, Mars is at 8 degrees. So within that 30-degree sway of this whole house, Mars sits at 8 degrees. We will use degrees a lot. So just good to notate that that's part of what you're looking at on the chart. And then if you go a little bit lower, Maggie, to that smaller number, that's 12 minutes. The minutes get you even more detailed as to where Mars was at that exact moment. We don't really use minutes as much. We probably won't really actually use them all that much, but it's still good to know. So that's the planet. The planet is the what. Now, we've got Mars sitting in what sign? Let's go out, peek at the sign. That's Aquarius. So when we look at the sign, we're looking at how. How is Mars expressing? So if Mars is inspiration, drive, motivation, anger, et cetera, and Aquarius is the archetype of the rebel, the genius, the innovator, likes to do things outside of the box, likes to do things differently, then we're looking at a Mars, we're looking at motivation and action that expresses how in an Aquarian way. So it expresses in a different way. This person, who happens to be me, when they do a thing, when I do a thing, I have to do a thing in my own unique way. You're not going to tell me how to do it. You can suggest to me how to do it, and I might be like, cool, thanks. And then I'm probably going to go do it the opposite way. It's just how that works for me. And I see this so alive in myself all of the time. So we've got the planet is the what. What is acting? What are we looking at? The sign is the how. How is it expressing? And then the house is where it manifests in your life. Now, this doesn't mean that Mars, I'm not a Mars in Aquarius, period. And that means that just generally in my life, I happen to act in that way. And it's probably pretty true. However, when we look at the third house, which is where Mars lives in my archetype, in my landscape, in my bodyscape, if you will, my psychescape. Can a psychescape be a thing? I like that.
I like that. Yeah.
The third house is all about communication, is the primary thing. All houses, as you'll come to learn, and that'll be its own whole class, have some random things in there. For example, the third house is also short-term travel and siblings, and there's a couple other things thrown in there. But let's take communication as the primary thing. So that Aquarian Mars is going to express through me in my communication perhaps more strongly than you're going to see it present anywhere else in my psychescape. I've just coined this new term.
I love that.
I love this too, actually. And so just as a comparison, if it were, let's just say that Mars in Aquarius were in my 10th house happens to be about career, then you're probably going to see a really Aquarian nature to the things that I bring forth in the work that I do. Now it happens to be that I just like love to talk. And so I talk for work. So that all works out really nicely for me. But you can see all of these things are related, but those are the specifics. So you've got the planet is the what, the sign is the how, and the houses are the where. So you might say overall that a planet in a sign, in a house, describes a psychological function expressing itself through a certain style in a particular area of life. That's maybe like the succinct sentence for what we're looking at here. So I think that's all the basics I wanted to get across. I mean, maybe I'll mention this too. The zodiac symbols on the outside, just again, like sort of shouting out some of the things we really love about Luna and how beautiful this is. The colors on the outside relate to the elements. So if you'll start at Sagittarius on the left-hand side, Maggie, Sagittarius is a fire sign, so it's red. And then if you see that there are two other fire signs, we've got Leo and Aries. And then as you go through from there, next we have Capricorn ruling that second house. And it's kind of this like brownish, I don't really know what to call that color, but that's earth. Then you move into this kind of teal color for Aquarius, that's air. And then you move into the blue for water. So kind of cool. Again, I don't know, psychologically, I think it makes it a lot easier to anchor into what you're looking at. And, the last thing beside the elements that I didn't mention was earlier, Maggie, when I said the middle of the chart and you were pointing at the aspects, I will shout out the aspects too. Here in the very middle, all these lines that you see of different colors, these are what we call aspects. And again, there's going to be a class literally on all of these different things. So this is just giving you the overarching, but these lines are essentially communication between the planets. And because all of this, again, astronomically, mathematically, all the things, there's a lot of math that goes into this. So there are specific kinds of relationships that dictate a certain kind of communication between planets, whether it's 90 degrees, 120 degrees, 150, etc. And when we see these lines in the middle, these aspects, we know, okay, hey, that planet is having a communication with that planet. And then as you continue to learn, you'll figure out how to decipher the language that they're speaking to each other. So I think that was all the things. Did I miss anything?
I can't think of anything, but it's hard because it's so broad and we're trying to I think that was very succinct. The planet as the what, the sign as the how, and the house as the area of life that it affects. I love that. It makes it so easy.
It does. We will. I'll jump back in. I think what would be really good right now is Maggie's gonna put that into practical action now. So how great, good to know all that shit. Now, how does that tell you anything about me as Meli? How does that tell you anything about this moment in time? Well, when we're applying it psychologically to a person, Maggie is going to get into how to now take this chart and glean some interesting and beginner introductory information about a person. And then I will come back in and talk about a couple more things on the chart. But Maggie, take it away.
Take it away. Okay. So one way that we start with the chart is to look at the big three, the primal triad. We've mentioned this already. We've mentioned it in other episodes. That is essentially the rising sign, the sign that's on the horizon at the moment of your first breath, the sun sign, and the moon sign. That is just a good way. If you were to write like a summary over a book that you read, this would be similar. You're getting a summary of the individual. So let's start with the rising sign. I have heard many astrologers describe this in many different ways. I like the Greeks' approach. The rising sign, the sun and the moon are all connected, of course, in any way, they're all connected. The Greeks thought that the sun and the moon were like the drivers of the car, and the rising sign was the car, your body. So the sun, the outer expression of self, the moon, the inner expression of self, have a big role in the tendencies you have, the characteristics you have, which shapes the behaviors you engage in and the things that you're drawn to, which ultimately affects your body. And all of it interplays all the time. So we'll start with the rising sign. We're going to look to see, we know the rising sign is always connected to the first house. So we already have that. We already have that information down. We'll look at the sign. So Meli's rising sign is at 12 degrees of Sagittarius. So we know right away that a big part of who she is, like the summary of Meli, if Meli was a book, would have to do with fire. There would be something fiery. There's more than one thing fiery about Meli, but this is the first thing we look at, we see fire. We see fire is connected to action and to having energy. If you think about how the element fire works out in the world, fire doesn't approach a stop sign and wait for someone to pass and hang a right. Fire is on the move. Fire is going where the fuel is, and it's following that. It's more instinctual versus someone that wants to plan everything, or someone that wants to get to every corner and reassess. So we know that just we don't need to know very much more about Sagittarius itself, but we can go a little bit deeper down. If you think about Sagittarius, the symbol or the glyph, one of the characters that's associated with Sagittarius, I think of is horses. It's the centaur. What do horses do? They spread out over vast spaces. So they take up lots of room. So for Meli, just looking at a rising sign, we know that there's action. We know that there's this desire for freedom and to take up space and kind of spread out. So we know that that's a big part. I could look at, if I didn't know who she was, I would still make a similar assumption about how she shows up in the world. So that's one layer. If we go a little bit further, we go past just the most external layer, we go up to Meli and we introduce ourselves. We get a sense of her personality, her own flair that she exudes as she's just naturally being herself. We'll come over to her sun sign. And again, we're going to start by looking at the symbol, the sign. What zodiac sign are we looking at? We're looking at 29 degrees of Aries. So again, we see fire. So now not only we see more than one fire, so we know that there's a lot of action here. We can continue to zoom in by getting as far into Aries as we want. We can remember that Mars is associated with Aries. It's the ruling planet. So we know that there's this courage, this just ability to, like, I think of Mars as the god of war. And so there's this ability to drive forth. So we see that. We see that the sun is in the 5th house. So this shows up for Meli. Her personality really shines in fifth house areas of life. Fifth house is connected to creativity and to like play, joyfulness, that kind of inner child part of who you are. So that continues to kind of zero in the specific unique flavor. We see that's a big part of who she is. We can take it a step further. We can go to her moon, which is then the inner expression, her emotional world, how she feels nurtured, how she feels supported from a not as physical kind of a way. It's more about the heart. It's more about the inner world. And we see that it's in Gemini. So we know that's air. This is different. This is different than the fire. Air is more connected to intellect and to communicating, all the mental operations. I don't know if you know this about Meli, but she is she's connected to everybody. She has friends all over the United States. She mailed over 100 postcards while she was traveling this summer. I can't get over that. That is air. That is a really good way to, like, a connection is so important to her that she has 100 people to send postcards to. We get a little bit deeper here. We have that, we know air is prevalent, and then we see that it's in the seventh house. Seventh house is all about partnership. It's the kind of partnership that is super close, like a marriage or a business contract. And just as what I've already shared, partnership is a big part of who she is. So that's a very broad explanation, sun, moon, and rising. We do that for each planet as we go through the chart. When we do readings for people, those are the three that we typically start with. That would be the three that if I was out somewhere and I wanted to get a sense of who a person is, I would pull those up just to give me an idea. I'm still curious. I'm not going to hold people to what I think they should be because of where their moon is, but it's like going through the initial first steps of meeting and getting to know someone. You can enter into a situation with a basis of understanding already. So, am I missing anything?
I think that was beautiful. I don't think you missed anything. I want to say just a couple of quick things that in my practice, I decided somewhere along the way that I wanted to assign a verb to the rising sun and moon because it helps you just kind of quickly remember what, at least it helps me speaking for myself. But since I'm one of the two people teaching you right now, I'm going to share it. I like to think as the rising sign as how you act in the world. Like it's literally how you rise into the world. Maggie, you had written here interface with the world. That's also great. But the word act, the way that your ascendant shows up is how you show up in the world. So to me, I think that's how I act. The sun sign, like Maggie said, like when you really just get to kind of, I don't know if you use the word essence, but when you really just go a little deeper and get the full kind of feel of somebody, that's just how you be. So for me, the sun is just how you be. You can't be any other way. That's going to be a major part of your archetype. And then the moon is how you feel. So I just want to throw those out there as options for you to consider to help you remember what the primal triad, what those three are kind of come together, what they bring to the table, if you will. The other thing I just wanted to mention, which we'll get into a little bit more in this next section where I'm going to teach a little bit further into the chart, but looking over at the rising sign, where it says AC, we didn't really specifically mention this, but AC I don't think we've used the word ascendant yet, but ascendant and rising can be used interchangeably or are used interchangeably. So that is the AC. You might be looking at that thinking, how the hell do I know that's the rising sign? Well, you always know you're going to find the rising sign in the first house. Like we said, that's dictated by the chart, but ascendant. So now let's put this into a little bit more practice because repetition is the mother of skill. And because Maggie and I are your two guides on this journey, let's pull up Maggie's chart so we can figure out her rising sun and moon. And then we'll also do just even one more so we can get a little bit more practice. Maggie, may I do the honors?
Please.
Okay, wonderful. All right. So looking at Maggie's chart, we see a bit of a similarity to my chart because overruling the first house, what do we see? We see that red, fiery Sagittarius And Maggie used the horse. She loves the horse archetype for Sagittarius, which I do too. I think it's great. But I really connected when I first learned that the symbol of the arrow is for the archer. And if you just imagine an archer with his bow and arrow, sort of just like standing wherever, but I imagine him in like a desert for some reason. And he just looks up at the sky and he's got his arrow pulled back and then he just lets it go. And it's like you have no idea where that arrow is going to land. This is a very Sagittarian feel, that energy of vastness, of expansion, of opportunity, of possibility. And optimism is another word that comes to mind. Again, we'll get more into that later, but these are just to add on. So everything Maggie said essentially about how she would think about how I probably act in the world in some pieces. There's this fire. This person takes up space. This person likes to be in action. And then again, some of those Sagittarian flavors. So now I go around and I search for the glyph for the sun. And the sun is one of the easier ones to memorize. And memorizing the symbology in astrology is a 100% necessary thing to do. If you are taking the class with us, part of your workbook and PDFs is that you are going to have flashcards that have these symbols and the definitions, and we will be in class practicing, because by the end of this 9 weeks, you are going to undoubtedly, with just zero question in my mind, that you will know every single glyph and you will understand how to immediately identify them when you see them. The sun, however, makes it pretty easy. It's a circle with a dot in the middle, and it's yellow on Luna, which is great. So I find Maggie's sun right above, not too far from her ascendant, and it is in Scorpio. So I look at the sign first. I see water. I see Scorpio. So water are our signs that really seek depth. They're considered very emotional signs. So if you just actually think about the behavior of water, water seeks the deepest point. It's always going to get into crevices, and that's how it lives. And so if you think about that psychologically, these archetypes, the water signs, like to explore depths. And Scorpio really, really likes to explore depths of the 3 water signs. So knowing things about Scorpio, there's this intensity, there's this intuition. Water signs are also, actually, water and fire are both very much known for their intuition. Scorpio likes extremes. Scorpio also likes privacy. So this gives me an idea of the type of person that I'm dealing with here. There's quite a bit of paradox in those words that I just shared. So Scorpios are known for kind of their mysteriousness, and I think that paradox has a lot to do with that. And then I see that it's ruling Maggie's 12th house. So the 12th house is sort of the house of, I like to think of it, of the backstage of life, right? So like the show cannot go on if the stuff is not happening backstage, but you don't see what's going on back there. It's hidden. So this is like hidden realms. This is subconscious realms. This is like psychological stuff. And it's also secrets. It's stuff that you might just want to, I used to, and sometimes do still say, also kind of like a junk drawer. It's like, yeah, you put the things you don't really want to deal with there, but like you still have to deal with them. They still are a part of you and a part of how you present psychologically. So I now already know that I have a Scorpio who probably has this penchant toward privacy. Now I see the 12th house and I see, okay, so I've got somebody who really likes their backstage time. They don't mind being in the darkness, take that as you will. And because again, they do like the depths too. So they don't mind being sort of not on the front stage. Doesn't mean that they can't be, doesn't mean that they won't be, but they do require for their sanity to explore the depths and explore the darkness and explore the hidden realms. Okay.
Amen.
And lastly, for our primal triad, we look for the moon. And again, the easiest glyphs, because the moon looks like a freaking moon, looks like a crescent moon. And there we find Maggie's moon at 9 degrees of Libra. So Libra is an air sign. So same color as my moon. My moon was Gemini, and Libra is one of our other air signs. That was actually part of how this podcast started, was we thought that was really fun that we had the same rising signs and different air signs alongside our original third co-host, who was the third of the air signs and also a Sag rising. So just a fun little fact there. But what does this mean? Libra moon. Okay, so I know I'm looking at an air sign, opposite of water. Air lives up here. And I always like to do that sort of up here because air is connected with the mind. And so it's easy to also just think like brain, thought processes. Typically, the air signs like to be in thought. They like to think, they like to understand, they like to use the mind. And Libra is actually the only of the zodiac signs that is an inanimate object. It's a scale. And so Libra really likes to balance the scales. Libra likes to make sure that there's peace and there is harmony and that it's that things are kind of like good to go. So when I have the moon, how Maggie feels, this deeper part of her really likes peace and harmony. And so I get this idea of how Maggie might present based on her moon, that she likes to make sure things are good, people are comfortable, things are okay. This can sometimes present as people pleasing. This is how we start to break down archetypes. And the 11th house is the house of communities, friendships, future aspirations. So I know that that's a really important placement for Maggie. And even though we're not going to go any further than that right now, just because we're looking at a chart and it's important to what I just said, just because her moon is there, and even if her moon were there all by itself, I would still know that communities, friendships, etc., are important to her. But knowing that she's got two other things right there, two other placements, and we're not going to get into what they are right now, just visually my eyeballs fall on that and I go, okay, well, that's like a double scoop of Libra. And I know that this is an important area of Maggie's chart because we've got more than just that one thing. So how'd I do? All right.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So let's do just one more. That's not us. Luna has this awesome feature that we love that's really kind of fun, where you can pull up public charts for a bunch of people. I don't know how many people are in that database actually, but there have been times where I go look for somebody who I didn't think would be in there and they were. Like, for example, recently with the Winter Olympics, somebody asked me about Lindsey Vonn, who is that skier who injured herself. They wanted to know like, hey, what was going on in her chart at that moment? And I was like, oh, I'll just go see if it's there. And she was in there. I was like, oh, that's rad. So wow. We're going to choose somebody who's not surprising that's in there just for funsies. We decided to peek at Taylor Swift's chart and have a look and see, how quickly can you figure out what her rising sun and moon are? I don't want to stretch it along too long, but essentially, I'm not going to get into the archetypal breakdown of Taylor right now. Maybe we do that some other time. Just to make this really clean and simple, we look over the first house. The first house is ruled by Scorpio. She is a Scorpio rising. I find the sun glyph. There it is. It is second house. Okay, great. But it's ruled by Sagittarius. So she is a Sagittarius sun. And then I look for her moon. There it is at the top of the chart. 1 degree moon in Cancer. She's a Cancer moon. So I know right out the gate that Taylor is a Scorpio rising, Sagittarius sun, Cancer moon. She's got double water and fire. I would love, Maggie, could you pull Luna itself up in your browser, please? Because I would like to really quickly show you guys a wonderful feature that is so fun. And I think this is like the most beginner-friendly feature that exists. Well, okay, that might be like a little dramatic, but it is one of the most beginner-friendly features because I truly believe anybody could start using Luna immediately and would be able to utilize this feature to learn some stuff. So go ahead, and this is the public charts area that Maggie's in right now. You can see it says public charts. It's got all these people. So she's going to search for Taylor. And we've got even James. Oh, I love James Taylor, even though his music kind of puts you to sleep, but he's so great. Okay, so this is what Luna looks like. What we've been showing you the charts because we like for them to be as big as possible. We're showing them to you downloaded on the computer as a PDF. But when you're looking at it in Luna, which again, in class, we'll be looking at this stuff a lot and navigating through the software itself. But this is what it looks like when you're looking at a chart. And you can see on the left-hand side, Taylor Swift, December 15th, et cetera. Wonderful. Okay, so I want Maggie to tap on right there, infographic. And this is the beginner friendly thing I'm talking about that I love. So this is called, just pause there for 1 second, please. This is called the infographic. And essentially, if you're looking at that chart and you're still green and you're like, oh my God, I'm not taking the Celestial Essentials course yet. What am I looking at? Well, you could just pop into the infographic, and right there, it shows you the sun symbol in Sagittarius and shows you Sagittarius mutable fire. And it shows you the moon, and it shows you Cancer and rising Scorpio. And as you keep scrolling down on this page, you get kind of all of the main information. Pause right there on zodiac attributes. You have these 2 pie charts that show you the element and the quality breakdown, or the modes. That's actually going to be our next call. Our next class will be on that. And then there's a bunch of other graphs and stuff as you go down. We don't need to look at them all. I just wanted to show that there is all this really, oh my gosh, go down real quick. Actually, now go to her declination. What the hell is that? That's so far out on the top. This is like, will you hover on that so I can see what it is? I literally actually am asking you. Moon, super far out there. Cool.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of really interesting information here that's really easy to break down. This is one of my favorite beginner things. And you know what? While we're here, Maggie, might as well go back out to her chart real quick. Go back to and do me a favor and just click on, it doesn't matter, click on any planet, click on the sun, and then click on it one more time. So if you double click on any planet, you have all this information that, like, without me yapping in your ear and telling you about it, you could just read if you prefer that. You could read all about sun. You could read all about Sagittarius. You could read all about coordinates and first house and all the things. So this is something that I'm not trying to talk you out of coming to hang out with us, but I do think it's really important to know the power of this software and why it is that we use it and why it is that we're choosing to use it, for you to learn as much as you possibly can and make this process as easeful for you as possible. All right. So we're basically almost at the end here. If you could pull up, we do want to show you that quick comparison, as we promised earlier, between a whole sign and a Placidus chart. So you could just quickly see the difference. And I do think that this is really important because there are a lot of apps and softwares that are prevalent. For example, the Pattern and CoStar are 2 very popular ones. And I can't remember right now which one automatically defaults to Placidus. I think it's CoStar. And so when I'm doing readings with people, or even just somebody's asking me something about their chart, I always ask, hey, have you done this before? What's the version you're looking at? Because it can look very different, and that can kind of really throw people off. So here we're looking at Maggie's chart side by side, and Maggie, I'll let you take it from here so you can kind of explain the main difference.
Yeah, so we'll start with this whole sign, because that's what you've been looking at this whole time. You'll notice, look at the pizza pie slices. We have one, it's the first house, the second house, third house. They all match. They're all the same size. If you come over here to this Placidus chart, they're way off. They're way different. I see this is the midheaven. We're going to talk about that. That's part of the angles. Again, we're going to get deeper into that, but you'll see this thick line going from the bottom of the chart to the top. It's a little bit offset. It changes the size of the houses. So some of my houses in a Placidus chart have more than 30 degrees in them. It looks different. You'll notice in whole sign, my Sun, Pluto, Mercury configuration is very close to that angle, to the horizon line in the 12th house. If you come over back to this Placidus, you'll see that same configuration is in an entirely different area. It's in the 11th house. So I will flip-flop between them, different charts for different things that I'm looking for. I think that I always get relevant snippets, whether someone is giving me insights from a Placidus chart or from a whole sign. I don't tend to think that like one is right and one is wrong. I think that they're just different charts for different occasions, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. And you just queued me up perfectly. Let's just leave these up for me to finish off with this last little bit about the charts. It's prudent to go through it in this very first sort of overlay of the charts, because it is a very important piece, which is, we mentioned it kind of briefly and we've talked about it a bit, but the angles and this horizon line that Maggie was just speaking of, I want to point out, how important these areas of the chart are. So on the left-hand side on that whole sign chart, you're looking at the horizon line in the middle, and on Placidus, you see it the exact same way, going horizontally through. And this is literally the horizon line in the sky. So like I said, if you were to take a picture of the sky the moment that so-and-so was born, this horizon line is actually representing the sky. And what that means is that based on where I see the sun, that will tell me quickly, I know when someone was born. So you might remember in my chart, my sun was at the bottom of the chart. And in this chart, Maggie's is above the horizon, but it's coming toward the eastern horizon line. So if her sun were all the way, just for simplicity's sake, if her sun were all the way just at the tippity top of the chart, then I know that she was born at high noon. As it's moving its way toward the eastern horizon line, I know that that means that it's moving toward dawn time. So I'm going to guess that she was born somewhere in between. It's got to be between noon and dawn. And it might be between 8 and 9 a.m. I actually don't know what time. What time were you born?
9:45.
Okay.
Good job.
All right. I was a little off. It was close. So 9:45 a.m. And then again, just for contrast, you don't have to pull it up, but mine is at the bottom and I was born at 11:08 p.m. So what's below the horizon is in the dark in the nighttime. What's above the horizon is in the daytime. So kind of cool to know that. I didn't know that until like 2 years into studying astrology. My mind was blown. I was like, why wasn't this one of the first things that I learned? So I just think that that's fun to know. Now that's how we sort of work with that horizon line. Now let's look at the vertical line that's going very cleanly through that whole sign chart on the left-hand side. And then pop over to the other side, and this is where things start to get a little bit crazy. So what do these lines represent? Well, both the horizon line and the vertical line, and for simplicity, looking at the left-hand side for the moment, these represent the angles. What they do, they actually, I guess, more so create the angles of the chart. So let's talk about the angles real quick, because this is, again, sort of astrology 101, some of the main things that an astrologer will look at first to learn about a person. So we've already talked a lot about one of the angles, and that's the first angle, which is the ascendant or the rising sign. A major difference that you'll notice here, and this is just to have your eyeballs have a detail-oriented knowing of things. On that left-hand side, you notice that the AC, which I said is the ascendant, that represents the rising sign. On the Placidus chart on the right, do you see that AC? The answer to that is no. And the reason is because the way that the Placidus chart is built, don't ask me anymore about math because I don't know, but the angle, it's the horizon line itself is the ascendant line. It's representing that 24-degree ascendant, which if you look all the way on I know it's kind of small right now, but if you look all the way on the far outside of the chart where it says 24-degree Sagittarius, that is how you know what the ascendant is when you're looking at a Placidus chart. It's not going to actually tell you where the ascendant is because that horizon line is the ascendant. Mind blown. Okay, anyway, back to whole sign on the left. Let's finish up the angles here. So we're going to go around in counterclockwise direction, which is how we always look at the chart, and the movement that the vast majority of our celestial bodies make is counterclockwise. So we start with the ascendant. That is the first angle. And that angle represents, we've talked about this a lot, represents body. It represents self. Okay. For simplicity, let's just leave it at that. I, self. That is the main thing that ascendant represents. And then we move through houses number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and boom, we hit the next angle, if you will. And that angle is considered the IC. Now, I again, we'll learn more as we go through. When you're looking at the Placidus chart on the right, you notice that the actual angles are represented by the line itself. You could look back on the left-hand side and you might go, Meli, how is it that you're telling me that this perfectly simple vertical line is the IC, but really I see the IC all the way over there in the 5th house? I know, dear friends, mathematics. However, again, this is for cleanliness for you to understand that these sections, these quadrants of the chart are split up by these angles. Okay. So the IC itself, though, in this whole sign where it represents the IC, it's showing you that 17-degree Aries in the 5th house. The IC represents home. So we go from the first angle is self, I, self. And then after we move through the second, third, fourth, and it'll be really fun. I love telling sort of the story of how the zodiac builds on itself. It's really intelligent, but that first quadrant is all about self. And then we get to the IC, which is all about home, roots, legacy, ancestry. So all the things that have sort of built us and are like a part of us, if you will. So that's angle number 2. Then we move over to angle number 3. And angle number 3 is directly opposite. All of these angles obviously have their 2 signs are directly opposite another one of the angles. So the ascendant is opposite the descendant. And that's where we're at over here on the right-hand side. Now, as you can see, Maggie's got to go up a little bit to actually get to the descendant at 24 degrees of Gemini. And you'll see that her ascendant is 24 degrees of Sagittarius. So they're exactly opposite each other. And if ascendant is I and self, then descendant is we or other. we. And it's always in the 7th house, just like the ascendant is always in the 1st house. That never changes. And the 7th house, as Maggie spoke to a little bit when she was talking about my chart, is all about partnerships. And that is what that represents. So now we've moved from I to home to we, and we finish at the top of the chart at the midheaven, which in the whole sign chart, you're going to find the MC, which Maggie's got over there in the 11th house. And as you'll note in the Placidus chart, because you don't have the MC and all that stuff, and Maggie, you'll have to speak to that actually even a little bit better. It's in Libra, but it's not quote unquote in a house. Is it always, because it's always creating the cusp of those houses? Is that right? See, here I am. See, that fucks me all up. It fucks me all up.
You're the other way, Matt. I get so like, I don't understand anything.
It's fascinating though. I mean, there's always the blend of things anyway. And again, all of this is within us, right? But it's funny because I just don't spend enough time looking at Placidus charts that I was like, oh, that's fascinating. Anyway, let's not confuse the people. Back to the whole sign chart. Where the midheaven is, that MC all the way over in Libra 11th house, that is the most public facing part of the chart. So same as the AC-DC line, we're exactly opposite each other very easily. You can see the MC-IC line, that IC, which was the home. And by the way, IC stands for Imum Coli. It means like darkest night or something like that in Latin. I don't remember the exact, but you see that those are also exactly opposite each other at those 17 degrees. And so the MC represents the midheaven, and the midheaven is the most public facing part of the chart. So it is the opposite of the home part, all that kind of yummy, deeper stuff. This is now the yummy outer stuff. This is how you present outwardly in the world, how people see you on sort of the public stage. And those angles, so if you can really easily see, oh, well, that's interesting. Those represent, if you kind of had to break your life down or anybody's life down in the main sort of areas. Oh, yeah, well, we, home, and work, or, you know, I don't think I used the word work just yet, but career, public, the way that you are publicly really is represented in the way that you show up in your work and your career. So those are some pretty standard, I would say, spots that you got to hit when you're looking at overall life. And so that is why the angles are so important. And we will come back to this, as we will all things, with repetition, because there's a fun little trick when we're looking at the modalities to get a really good idea of kind of the same way that the primal triad gives you this like, oh, quick, I've got 2 fire, 1 air. I kind of got a good idea of this person. With the angles, we can do something very similar when it comes to the modalities, but we're not going to do that today because this has been a lot of information. I think a lot of really good information. I hope was broken down in a way that made a lot of sense to you guys. Maggie, is there anything else that you want to bring in to close out? Anything that
I don't think so. I just want to say that, like, one of the reasons that I love astrology is because you can go as deep into it as you want and get more and more and more information, you can start really broad and it can give you a really good idea of what you're looking at. And then from there, there's just so like I say often in my own head, I am excited to be an 80-year-old lady and like having done all of this time. This is something I'm going to do forever. I know it. And to get to that point and have practiced going and just getting all the information, it's amazing. I think you don't need to have spent 20 years in this to look at a chart and understand what you're looking at. So just start broad and then zero your way in because you'll never get to the bottom. It's really fun.
It's true. Absolutely. I love that. All right. So today we promised you that we would be covering what astrology studies and how it's been used over history. And Maggie gave us a really nice breakdown of that. So now you know some things about Persians and Greeks and Latin and oh my. We promised that we would go over the structure of the natal chart and all of the symbols and the lines and all of that. It would have been impossible to make this a reasonable amount of time if we got into all the specifics. But again, we got to layer it. It's just too much if you don't. So this is a really nice fundamental start, and come and listen and watch time and time again so you can just keep really hammering the information in. We promised we talk about why birth time matters and the big three or the primal triad. And I think we actually maybe didn't specifically tackle the why the birth time matters. This is why we're going over this. The ascendant, I mean, I think we maybe quasi mentioned it, but it's worth mentioning that everything changes if the birth time's not right, because the sign that was on that eastern horizon that dictates the ascendant or the rising, that is dictated by the minute that you were born. And that changes every 2.5 hours, 2 to 2.5 hours. So we want that to be as accurate as possible. And sometimes we understand there are situations that for whatever reason, there's no birth certificate or whatever it is. And there are astrologers who one day you and I will get this down, but there are astrologers that specialize in what's called chart rectification, where they have wonderful ways of figuring out when you were born. I have dabbled a little bit, and it's definitely an art and a science of its own that I'm going to need to practice a lot, I think, to
and like a party trick. It's insane.
It is. Yeah. Recently I had somebody who didn't know their time, and I was like, well, and it was a friend and whatever. And I was like, well, just tell me a couple of big things that have happened in your life and what the years were and what they were. And I was like, and I'll just like have a look. And I started looking, and I was like, this is not, no. So that is a whole thing in and of itself. We are not going to be teaching you that anytime soon, but it is possible to go find it. However, really, like if somebody's like, oh, I'm pretty sure my mom said it was 9. I cannot tell you the amount of times that people, I'm pretty sure it was 9. And then they call their mom and she's like, oh, actually it was like 10:15. That matters. It makes a big difference, because also then the degrees really matter too. So we want to be as specific as possible. I jokingly, when I first started doing this years ago, the first couple of years, I was amazed at how many times I was the catalyst for somebody to pick up the phone and call their mom. I was like, I feel like I'm connecting people and their moms worldwide. So they'd be like, oh, I just call my mom real quick and see what time I was born.
That's funny.
That's why the birth time matters. And so now we have officially made good on all the promises of what we are going to cover today. And we hope that it was super useful so that you can look at a chart and really feel like you get it. Next episode will be elements and modes or modalities. So we're going to dive deep into fire, earth, air, water. You're going to fully understand what the deal is with all those. I think that's like the gateway drug to astrology. If you've got really somebody who's skeptical, it's like either full moon and tides or elements that kind of start to get people in the door. Modalities are a little bit more out there to get, but the concept is quite simple. We'll get into that. And that's it. We're not going to go much further than that just yet. Thank you, Luna Astrology, for making the most beautiful software for y'all to learn from, for us to use. Hope you enjoyed getting a little mini tour into it today. And we will be throwing those kinds of moments and features out so you can really kind of fall in love with the software as you go, if you're not already in love with it just by looking on it. And I think that's all the things. So we can't wait to continue down this journey with you, whether you're here with us for the first time again, or you're here with us for the 101th time, 101st time. That's fine. Please know that we are just so grateful for you. And whether you choose to learn over these next 8 weeks on your own self-paced listening to these, or whether you're choosing to join us in the Celestial Essentials course, we're so stoked to have you. And we want to hear from you. We always want to hear from you. So thank you for being here. We love ya. Until next time, stay curious.
Stay curious.